You want them to make change. And part of the problem that leads to failure is not realizing that, not realizing the stakes of designing something new or even redesigning something. It's all about change, and you have to approach it as change.
And one of the amazing things about books, as I was reading the book, I kind of found myself thinking that this is a blueprint for change, but it's also a blueprint for design thinking. And you mentioned designers and design leaders as one of the most suited to drive that change.
And it, you want to understand that there are things you don't know at the start of any problem. No matter how brilliant you are, no matter how experienced your team, there are still things you don't know, and you have to think systemically about this whole problem. And in the book, we talk about COVID, to the scientists and medical experts who organized and discovered, used the mRNA, or forget the name of it, but anyway, they used a brilliant new approach to creating the vaccine. And to them, that was the problem, right? We'll create this vaccine and we'll solve the problem of COVID. They didn't anticipate that they would have to be dealing with celebrities who were worried about their virility being impacted, or that there would be some people who thought that horse paste was a likely substitute. They didn't anticipate that. Right. And those are the things that we have to anticipate now. We have to kind of understand that it's a very complex, multidimensional world that we live in, and all of these things are possible, the craziness, and we just have to anticipate that. So that's one of the things that designers have. Again, I'll keep repeating that designers, their ability to visualize is a superpower. It's amazing how many people can't even draw a stick figure, and a good designer can illustrate an entire concept and help you grasp it very, very quickly. And that empowers the people on the team, because then they can bring their talents to bear, right? Because they understand the problem, and they can say, okay, I get it now. This is what I think. So things that designers often take for granted are big deals in this type of situation.
And I love the idea of kind of, you mentioned anticipating some of those more complex challenges in the complex society that we live in and complex organizations that we are part of. I think I was pleasantly surprised, probably shouldn't have been, but there was an entire chapter in your book dedicated about the value of research in driving and even trying to drive any kind of change in an organization.
It certainly can be. There's some obstacles to it that we can talk about later. But for me, the role of research is to clarify the problem and to discover a range of possible solutions. I never think of research as providing the answer. If you do that, you shut down all the other contributions that can come later, right? So to me, it's just like, okay, we clarified the problem. We've found as many of the unknowns as we can, and here's some directions that we can take it in. It's an iterative process because of the complexity. So you want to have a full range to explore. If you do that well, and that's the trick, then research becomes a way of empowering the team, inspiring the team, informing the team, and really giving them the knowledge and the insights to do their best work. So when it's done well, research can tie everyone on the team together and help them really excel. It is like an accelerant to doing good work. And the problem is, good research is expensive, and it's not easy to take shortcuts. I've seen them all, and they rarely work. So a lot of organizations, smaller ones, not the larger ones, will skip it. and just say, no, I'm going to go with my gut, or I've been in this industry for 10 years. I could make these decisions without help. And so it becomes, it's perceived as something that is optional, when I don't think it is. Yeah. So Maria and I both teach at Stanford in their continuing studies program. And so we deal with a lot of mid-career executives that take our course. And we hear this question a lot. It's probably the most common question that we get. And the bad news is that sometimes you can't convince senior leaders that UX research matters. And in those cases, honestly, it's best to leave those environments, because it's just a waste of your time and your talent to be in a situation where your senior management doesn't really understand the significance of what you do. But the good news is, in a majority of cases, you can convince them. It just takes time. You can't walk into an organization as a new UX professional and say, hey, I'm an expert. You guys all need to heed my advice. All right. You have to demonstrate your value over time. And so you have to have a little bit of patience. You have to build trust that you understand not only the users, because that's important, but that's not enough for senior management. Senior management wants to know that you understand the business, that you understand what their goals are, what their strategies are, what they're trying to achieve, what benefits the bottom line. And to do that, you have to, you kind of have to present the value of your UX research in terms that business leaders can relate to. So I would often talk about the ability of UX research to reduce risk, or to protect the organization, protect a new, for instance, a new product from cannibalizing other products, or to give us insight into a competitor's strategy, or to reduce turnover, or, we use those types of explanations to elevate the significance of UX research. Yeah, it depends on where you're coming from. So if you're an outside agency, you've got a sponsor, right? You're hired in. And whoever hires you in is at the beginning, that is your sponsor. And then as you work repeatedly with an organization, you do good work, and you start getting more and more champions and sponsors. If you're inside an organization, if you're internal, that's a little bit tougher, especially if you're brought in, say you're brought in to be a UX designer, and you don't get a lot of exposure. You know who the leaders are in the company, but they don't know who you are, and they don't have any reason to know who you are. That's tough. But there's ways you can work around that. One that is the simplest, I think, as long as you're comfortable speaking, is to start hosting talks. Start hosting talks about users. Just maybe schedule them on a Friday. Provide beer, provide something, attract people, and start developing a reputation for yourself as someone who not only knows a lot about users, but is willing to share that information, isn't trying to keep it hidden and protected. So that's one way that I've seen work. Certainly, if you're not comfortable doing stand-up speaking, there's artifacts you can develop. We loved developing things like, we would develop posters that explained either problems or personas or journey maps, and blow them up and make them big. We developed postcards. We called them postcards from the future, where we anticipated where the market was going, and we would send out postcards that showed a potential future. So there's lots of different ways that you can make user information and market information more attractive, more consumable, and more visible within your organization. And that ties back to you, and that elevates you. Then once someone notices you, You need to understand what they're trying to do. I mean, that was one thing I always made a point of understanding within the first 6 months of meeting someone new at a client, was to figure out where they were going in their career. Were they a long-term person within that career? Were they trying to move up the ladder? Did they just want to do a good job and not get fired? And then I became their advocate, right? Whatever they wanted to do, I wanted to help them do that. Mm-hmm. And that's how we built our relationships. And so they that was a trust issue. Mm-hmm. And they would realize that I had their back and mm-hmm. they could count on me. And then she elevates them and makes them heroes within the organization because they've contributed, this value to the organization. And little by little, her message gets adopted, and it shifts from her pushing her idea to other departments pulling. And the IBM story was the same thing. They shifted at some point at about 15 to 20% of the organization. They shifted from it being a push to being a pull. And that is, what we all should be looking for. Just don't go after too much at mm-hmm. one time, too much too early. Just realize, find your tribe, find the people who believe like you do, who want to make this change, who want to see it happen, and then work with them until you can demonstrate that, this makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And I think in this book, I think this was the design leader from our audit actually talked about doing regular all hands and mm-hmm. sending out essentially marketing in internal marketing email to all of the stakeholders and trying to keep them abreast. I think that was a very, very good.
I exited successfully. I have lots of clients and colleagues who are still my friends. So I was a successful person. Mm-hmm. I failed a ton of times, and I failed in really big ways. So you will fail. It's not, whether you're comfortable with it or not, you're going to fail. And so I think you have to have strategies for dealing with that failure when it happens. In my case, my strategy was to always be honest, to never try and hide my failures, to just come right out and say, look, I thought that this would work. It didn't. Here's where I think I was wrong. Here's where I think I made some misjudgments. Do any of you have, additional insights that you want to share with me? Do you want to tell me why I failed? And after a while, people got used to that. They weren't, at first it was unusual for a leader in a company to say, hey, I failed. I need some feedback from you. But after a while, people got that they liked it. And it gave them a sense of my transparency, my trustworthiness, and my vulnerability. And they started emulating it. So I was a role model for it. So it became, we legitimized it. We accepted that failure was possible. Now, that didn't mean we encouraged it. We never encouraged failure. And right. In some cases when there was a lot on the line and it was really risky, we would do, and Maria did this as well, we would do what we called pre-mortems. Like we would say, okay, what are the various ways that we could fail and how can we avoid that? And we do that up front before the project even started. So, I think it's just a matter of, you will get comfortable with it if you accept it and understand that it's going to happen. There's nothing you can do about it, but it's just part of the process of being successful. You can't be successful without failing at some points.
In 30 seconds, what is one takeaway from your book, from all your experience, from all the conversation today? One quick takeaway for the audience.
Yeah, so I would encourage all of you to figure out first what your relationship with change is, right? So ideally, as a UX professional or project manager or whatever role you're in, you should be as good at accepting and leading change as you are designing it for others, right? Sometimes we skip that part. We design it for others without being very open to change ourselves. And I think you want to start with yourself and figure out, how do you feel when change is forced on you, or when you have, you have to make change. And by starting with yourself, you have more empathy for the stakeholders that are out there. You have more, I think, sense of what it takes to feel good about change, and you gain more insight into yourself, which is always good.